The college football season is almost over, and that means the coaching hot news is right here. In fact, we already have potentially 3 hires, and we're not even at the last week of the season yet. We know James Franklin, who was fired by Penn State, has already been hired by Virginia Tech. And if you want to watch my review on why that is the best hire Virginia Tech could make, you can watch that video. We also have news that Eric Morris, the North Texas head coach, is becoming the new head coach of Oklahoma State. But about 10 minutes before I was recording this, which it is Wednesday before Thanksgiving for anyone maybe watching late, I saw a report that Alex Golesh might be the new head coach of Arkansas. The USF head coach is going to Arkansas. Now that wasn't on a really official reporting yet, so that could change, but I will be talking about that as a potential hiring, as well as Eric Morris, James Franklin, all of the current opening jobs, and all the potential coaches that could fill those jobs. So let's get into it. The first thing I'm going to do is rank each opening and why I think they're the best job, the second best job, etc. I'm not necessarily going to predict which coach I think will go where, because unless you have some insider information, we just don't know at this time. But I will be giving out a couple of, I could really see this as a good hiring there. The number one job is LSU. While LSU has some problems, they're one of the only schools to win multiple championships within the past 25 seasons, right? We know they're a recruiting hot hub. Currently, for the 2026 recruiting cycle, even though they've lost their head coach, they are sitting 12th. Since 2010, only 2 seasons have they finished outside the top 10 in recruiting. And they finished in the top 5 6 times. They consistently recruit top 10, top 5 recruiting classes. And that is with multiple head coaches. It is stated they have a $20 to $25 million NIL budget per year, and they have multiple championships with multiple coaches. So if you're a new coach, you have seen different head coaches come in and win a championship in short spans. Now LSU has demonstrated they provide a very short leash. Since 2000, coaches have only averaged 6.5 years as a head coach. But if you remove Les Miles, who is the longest tenured coach in that span, that average goes down to 4.6. So if you're a head coach, you have to be prepared. You have to win fast, basically. You have to either win a championship or show dominant success. And even someone like Ed Orgeron, who did that, one bad year, they booted them out. So you have to go into this knowing this could go sour really quick. There's also some weird stuff with the governor and politics being involved, with the governor probably being involved in the firing of Brian Kelly, but also saying he's not. The athletic director stepping down. There's also now reports of different people trying to sue each other. It is a top 5 job in the country. You know, there's only a few jobs. I'm not talking about top 5 opening. I'm talking about in the whole country, not including opening. There's only a few jobs that you would 100% take over LSU. So out of the jobs that are currently open, LSU is definitely the best job available. It gives you the best resources, whether it's players, the monies, the facilities. You know, like I said, they have won multiple championships, 2003, 2007, 2019, all in the current era or somewhat current era, because obviously we're in a new era with NIL deals. But LSU is by far the best job on the market right now. Obviously, we think Lane Kiffin is the main guy for that job. No one really knows if he will leave Ole Miss as I'm recording this. Obviously, Florida's also pushing hard to get him. Ole Miss is pushing hard to keep him. Lane Kiffin is that main guy for that job. But there are a few other head coaches that could be really good candidates that we will talk about in a little bit. The second best job is Florida. The Gators are historically one of the best programs, but they've struggled mightily recently. Since Tim Tebow's last year, 2009, Florida only has 4 double-digit win seasons. That's 4 out of 16 seasons. In 8 of those seasons, they've had less than 8 wins. So to be honest, they've been a below average team, a below average SEC team, right? Despite that, they're a 13th in recruiting in 2026. So that includes them being a bad team, firing their head coach. They're still 13th in 2026. Since 2015, they have 5 years where they're a top 10 team in recruiting and 9 years where they're top 15. So even post the Tebow championships, even post Urban Meyer, even with all these bad seasons, they are still recruiting at top 15 or better recruiting classes consistently. Florida doesn't need to win to get recruiting classes. They don't need great coaches to get these great recruiting classes. Now imagine they brought in an elite coach, if they brought in a Lane Kiffin or another elite guy, Florida is just a great head coach and some good management away from going back to the top of the country, going back to the top of the SEC, consistent playoff performances. The Florida job is unbelievably good. They've also have multiple championships within a recent time period. 1996, I know that wasn't that close ago, but still, 2006 and 2008, the two Tebow years. Since the Florida Athletic Department also makes approximately $190 million per year. That's a top 10 school in the country when it comes to that. So obviously not all that goes to football, but they have the resources. We know football is a big enough deal in Florida. They have the recruiting basis. They just need a head coach to come in and bring this team back to the promised land. I have Florida as my number 2 job in the country because of that. At number 3, I have Penn State. In the last 12 years, they have 6 double-digit win seasons. And since the 2021 shortened season due to COVID, they are 44-17. Now, recruiting in 2026 has taken a big hit. Right now, they're 82nd in recruiting. A lot of that is due to James Franklin leaving. I think they had 17 decommits since Franklin. Last time I was checked, it was 17 years in the top 20. So clearly, if you have the right coach there, they can recruit extremely well at Penn State. Now, Franklin's best attribute was his recruiting. So I'm not saying the next coach can come in and do just as good of a job, but if they're comparable, Penn State can quickly rise back to the top of the Big Ten. Speaking of the Big Ten, they benefit from being in the Big Ten because that's one of the 2 conferences where 3 or 4 teams can make the college football playoffs. So there's a clear path to get into that playoff, but they also have to beat some really good teams. Obviously, you have your Ohio States, your Michigans, your Oregons, right? The teams Franklin, former head coach, couldn't beat. But USC is really good. Washington is consistently up there. Iowa is no team to sniff at. So while yes, you do benefit from being in such a good conference, it's not guaranteed you can be even top 3 or 4 in that conference. But they do have a history of being really loyal to their coaches. Obviously, Franklin was there for a long time. Since 1930, that's almost 100 years ago, they've only had 6 head coaches. They also had 2 playoff wins just last year. So success is clearly a path at Penn State. I don't like as much as LSU and Florida just because I think it's easier to get elite recruiting classes down there. I think Penn State, you have to be a much better recruiter to do that. But Penn State has the resources. They have the history. A good coach can definitely get them right back on to the top of the Big Ten and the country. Next, we have Auburn, who I have as my 4th best job opening. And to be honest, I am not a massive fan of the Auburn head coaching position. It is the 4th best, but I do think there's a big drop from, I think like LSU and Florida kind of on a big tier. Then there's a drop to Penn State. Then there's a big drop to Auburn. Does have 2 championship appearances since 2011. They won it in 2011 with Cam Newton, and they lost in 2013. But since 2013, they've only have 1 double-digit win season. But they have 8 years where they have under 8 wins in that same time period. And that 2013 championship team was very, very good. But let's not act like they didn't have a couple lucky plays go their way. You know, they had that Hail Mary touchdown versus Georgia. Obviously, the kick 6 return versus Alabama. That quickly could have gone to a missing the SEC championship game path in that season. Now, they are 40th in recruiting in 2026. And then since 2015, they have 6 years in the top 10, 8 years in the top 15, and 10 years in the top 20. So recruiting is still going very well, but with the recruiting, with the lack of head coaching, they have struggled to separate themselves in the SEC, especially now that the conference is getting a little deeper, adding Texas, and that teams like Vanderbilt and Missouri are becoming a little more consistently better. They will be on their 3rd head coach in 6 years. In the last 4 years, the highest they've been ranked is 22nd. Like, this team is not an elite SEC team anymore. They are closer to a bottom half SEC than a top half the past 4 or 5 years, right? And I know like in the name, they're the competitors to Alabama, but I think that's more of a name thing than a true outcome thing. And maybe they just need to get the right guy. But if I'm the right guy, I don't really want to go to Auburn versus one of these other schools, right? So I think the Auburn job is overrated, but it is still the 4th best job in the country right now. At job number 5, I would have had Virginia Tech. Now, obviously, they are off the market because they just hired James Franklin. But I do want to make a point that this Virginia Tech job is actually very good. Under Frank Beamer from 93 to 2011, and I realize that was 15 years ago, but in that time frame, only Florida had more wins in all of college football. They finished ranked end of season in all but 3 of those seasons as well. So if you have the right coach, they win, right? They just win ball games. That's how it is. Now, they are currently 124th in 2026 recruiting, but Franklin is already pushing hard to improve that. He already is talking to a lot of those decommits from Penn State I just mentioned, years in the top 50. So they were still recruiting. And the thing with James Franklin, I talked about this, like I mentioned, I have a video about Franklin's hire at Tech. The thing about James Franklin is he recruited the DMV area extremely well. Virginia and Maryland, he crushed, and he can still go into that Pennsylvania, Ohio lane in Virginia Tech. So I think Franklin's going to be very happy at Virginia Tech. It's not as good of a job as Penn State, but he has a little less pressure being in the ACC. He doesn't have much pressure because, if they start winning 9-10 games consistently without the end goal success, they'll be happy at least for a while because they haven't had that since Frank Beamer. So Virginia Tech is a very good job. It's off the market now, but I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. And luckily, this happened as I was making these graphics. Oklahoma State, which I had at job number 6, is also taken by North Texas coach Eric Morris. And I will go in more depth about Eric Morris in this video. Now, Oklahoma State, like I said, I would have had at number 6. Historically, they're actually not as good. People think that they were always the rival with Oklahoma in the Big Ten. That really isn't quite the case. They only had one conference championship since 1996. Now, and unless Oklahoma State wins their last game of the season, they have 0 conference wins in the last 2 years. And that's with Texas and Oklahoma leaving. From 2010 to 2013, since 2010, they have 8 seasons of 10 plus wins. So that's very good. But if you're an elite program that thinks of themselves on the same plane as, again, Oklahoma or Texas, the 2 former best teams in the Big 12, you want a little more of that. And recruiting never thrived under Gundy. Obviously, he didn't do a terrible job at it, but they were around that 40 to 60 mark consistently when it comes to class rankings. Right now, though, they're ranked 122nd to the 2026 class. So Eric Morris has a lot of work to do, but he is very capable of it. He is arguably one of the best scouters and talent developers we have seen specifically at the quarterback position. For those of you that don't know, Eric Morris was the offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach at Texas Tech when Patrick Mahomes played there, helping develop him into one of the best quarterbacks in college at the moment. And obviously he went on to become one of the best players we've seen in NFL history. Baker Mayfield also came on to Texas Tech as a walk-on, right? It was not like he was a 4 or 5 star quarterback. Baker Mayfield was a walk-on at Texas Tech, who then went on to become a great starter, transfer to Oklahoma, win the Heisman, and become the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. And he's also doing great things at the NFL level. Eric Morris then became the head coach at FCS team, University of Incarnate Word, where he found a 0-star recruit that he brought in to be his new quarterback. That guy's name was Cam Ward. Cam Ward, as you know, just finished, 3rd or 4th in Heisman last year, became the number 1 overall pick, and is now the quarterback for the Titans. Eric Morris then became the offensive coordinator at Washington State, where he brought Cam Ward there also. Basically, Eric Morris, and now his current project at North Texas is Drew Mestamaker, a player who never started a single high school game at quarterback. But under Morris, he has become their starting quarterback. He has put up impressive statistics. He's looked good, and he has them at 10-1 going into this last game in an American Conference Championship game with the potential to still make the college football playoffs. Basically, Eric Morris has a long history of developing quarterbacks at any level, right? And the reason I'm saying this is I think he can bring the recruiting and development part of Oklahoma State up significantly. He already is used to that Texas area. Obviously, Oklahoma is right next to Texas. He's used to this area. He's used to developing players that might not want to go to the big schools, the Texas, Oklahomas, the guys that are willing to go to smaller schools like a North Texas, developing them into legit FBS players. I think Eric Morris is a phenomenal hire for Oklahoma State. I think out of all the Group 5 coaches that we will talk about later that could be looking for a job promotion, Eric Morris is the best fit for Oklahoma State. Now we have job number 7, which all of a sudden is also not available. So we're probably going to have our 3 jobs in a row that I would have ranked. Virginia Tech, Oklahoma State, and Arkansas all have hired their head coach. Now, again, as I'm recording this, the Alec Golesh hire hasn't been posted by any official reporters yet. But I don't really, the guy who I saw post it, I looked into him a little bit. He does seem to have enough connections, but I don't think he would make this up. Arkansas has hired the USF coach, Alex Golesh, to be their new head coach. Arkansas is not a great job, in my opinion. Since 2015, they only have 5 seasons of 7 or more wins, and they haven't had a winning conference record since 2015. They're currently 80th in 2026 recruiting. That's last in the SEC. Since 2015, they have only 2 years in the top 15, 6 years in the top 50. So they kind of linger around that 40 to 60 recruiting range frequently, which as a whole is very good, but as an SEC team is not. Now, let's be honest, Arkansas actually has one of the best potential boosters in NIL deals of any college. With Walmart right over there, with Tyson's, they have big companies right in their hometown. And we've seen them invest in basketball a lot, and it's paid off. If they just bring a little more into football, if Alex Golesh can really stabilize that program from a coaching standpoint, I could see Arkansas being a much better place to play and a much better team next year. But it's a far from the top job. It is on the bottom of the SEC, along with kind of Kentucky when it comes to consistency basis. You know, I think he'll do well there. I don't really know if it's that much better of a job at USF. I know that sounds kind of crazy because USF is obviously a group of 5 team, and I'm sure he's getting a major pay boost to be there. But it's just one of those things that's like, granted, it's just one of those things where like he's leaving to go be on the bottom of the SEC forever. Granted, I thought the same thing when Kurt Cignetti left JMU. I thought he was going to be at the bottom of the Big Ten. He turned it around. They're number 2 in the country now. Alex Golesh is a great coach, and I think he can really get the best out of Arkansas. So maybe he'll bring them up in the SEC rankings for sure. But I don't think Arkansas is a great job in the moment. At number 8, I have UCLA. UCLA is one of those schools that should be very good. They sit in a major recruiting hub in LA and Southern California as a whole. And they have a lot of money to be major competitors in the NIL and transfer portal. But the school needs to commit. Currently, they are 43rd in 2026 recruiting, which, let's be honest, given the circumstances, that's pretty good. And since 2015, they have 1 year in the top 15, 6 years in the top 25, and 11 in the top 50. So they actually recruit very well, which is why I have them at number 8 above the rest of the schools that we were talking about. But they only have 2 double-digit win seasons since 2005. That's 13 and 14. And since 20, only 4 seasons of 8 or more wins. So despite the recruiting success, they just lose all their games. They haven't really been competitive in the Pac-12. And now that they're in the Big Ten, they're still not competitive. And the conference is only getting harder. It's getting deeper. So I think the UCLA job has a lot of potential, but whatever coach goes there has to prepare for a very tough time because we've seen a lot of coaches come in, even if they can recruit well, they can't translate it to the wins. Job number 9, I have California, just under UCLA. I think they're very similar jobs, but California recruits worse. They're currently 48th in 2026 recruiting, which is pretty good. But since 2015, 1 year in the top 30, 5 years in the top 40, and then 9 in the top 60. So that's kind of where they sit, is that 60th range. They only have 6 bowl wins in the last 20 years. They continue to bring in a lot of talent, actually, but then they lose it to other programs. Mendoza, the Heisman favorite at Indiana, came from there. Jaden Ott, the running back at Oklahoma, came from there. But they have a new GM, Ron Rivera, former NFL head coach. That should help. But Cal doesn't recruit as well as UCLA. They don't keep their players well that they do bring in, and they still don't win games. So I have them below UCLA as our 9th best job opening of all the jobs that became open this offseason. Jobs 10, 11, 12, I'm not going to talk too much about. Stanford, I have at 10. They have had moments of success in the past, but obviously it's a tougher place. You know, you have a lot of great California schools near there. It's a very academic, prestigious school. It is tough to get into. It's tough to maintain what you have to do. They're just not going to be able to bring in as many great guys as other schools. Andrew Luck might help some as GM. They have moments where they look really good. They have other moments where they just fall off a cliff. Obviously, the Pac-12 is rebuilding, but it's now a very weak conference, so they don't have a good conference to help boost their image anymore. And then number 12, I have UAB. I mean, listen, I'm sorry if you're a UAB fan, but you're the worst job on the market. Like, let's be honest, it's UAB. So Now we're going to go over potential candidates for some of these openings and future openings. And I have 6 tiers. I have former legends, the just fired, established positions, the group of 5 gurus, current coordinators, and NFL to NIL, the current pro coaches. Now, all because you're in tier 1 or tier 2, that doesn't mean you're better than tier 3 or tier 4. These are more groups than tiers, but tiers sound better. So yeah, former legends, we have 2, the main one being Nick Saban. I'm not going to talk about Nick Saban a ton because if you're watching a college football video, you know who Nick Saban is. I don't think he's coming out of retirement. The only job that would be good enough right now is LSU, and I think he would have taken it by now if he actually wanted to go to LSU. But he's the greatest coach of all time, especially of the current era, but I don't think he's coming back. He's a little older, he's enjoying his retirement and his current jobs. I don't think he likes the NIL deal. So Nick Saban is not coming back. The other former legend is Urban Meyer, 3-time national championship, one of the best career records of all time. Even before he retired, he was crushing it. But apparently, he interviewed for the Penn State job. I don't know how accurate this is, but apparently he interviewed for the Penn State job and it didn't go great. I guess his answers on NIL weren't what they looked for. So I don't think he's going to come back at this point. If Penn State doesn't want him, Florida or LSU won't want him. I think he's too big of a name to go to any other small school. But throwing his name out there because he is one of the greatest coaches of all time. Obviously, there has been some controversy around his name and his career. But I think almost any school would take his coaching. But clearly, there's some problems on the NIL transfer portal part of it. Just fired. Obviously, Franklin is not on this list anymore because he's already committed to Virginia Tech. So I have Brian Kelly. Now, obviously, there are other coaches that were just fired. Hugh Freeze, Sam Pittman. But I think Brian Kelly is the only one that stands out as a quality coach in their career. Now, Kelly's far from perfect, but he is 276 in his career. He was 29-11 his last full 3 seasons. And even when he was fired, he was 5-3. So he doesn't really lose. He just doesn't go up to the standard of LSU. He returned Notre Dame to greatness after he reformed Cincinnati. So he's proven he can win with, at the time, group of 5 teams like a Cincinnati, a program like Notre Dame. He's a 10-6 bowl record. I could see him going to a more of a mid-school like Cincinnati was when he got there and bringing them back up, because I don't really think, obviously LSU is the top job in the market. They're not going to bring him in. I don't see Florida or Penn State bringing him in. So I think he actually goes to a smaller school. Maybe he takes a year or 2 off, rebuilds them, then he gets back into the big school areas. Now, the established is basically coaches that are at current jobs that maybe they look at some of these other jobs as upgrades and they're willing to go to. I'm not saying I project these guys to leave their schools. Some of them, I don't think they leave at all, but their names have been floated out there. So I'm going to talk about them. Starting off with Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. I don't think there's any chance he leaves. Clearly, teams like a LSU and a Florida would love to have Marcus Freeman, but he's 9-2 at Notre Dame. He has them ranked number 9. He had them in the national championship last year. Could get back this year. He's not leaving, but he is one of the best coaches available for these schools. Same with Dane Lanning. I do think overall LSU and probably Florida are better jobs, but Dane Lanning has it so good at Oregon. He has the Nike money. He recruits extremely well. He wins consistently, going undefeated up until the playoffs last year. He's 10-1, number 6 in the country this year. Dane Lanning is not leaving Oregon. The one coach that could leave, though, is Lane Kiffin. Kiffin has had some up and down years in his career. He doesn't win everywhere, but recently he has settled in and proven his ability to be a great coach. This is the best stretch in Ole Miss history. He's 116-53 in his career, 5-4 bowl record. We know the reports, LSU and Florida are both pushing for Lane Kiffin a lot, and Ole Miss is trying their best to hold on to him. Personally, if I was Lane, I'd stay put. I don't think he can do anything wrong at Ole Miss. Even if they don't get those 10, 11 win seasons, I think they want to keep him. LSU, we know they'll fire you if you don't win, or if you are winning but don't win enough. But I think it is very possible he will leave LSU to Florida because I do think they have more championship potential than Ole Miss. Jeff Brom at Louisville, they're 7-4. They were ranked for a little bit this year. He has a proven ability to turn teams around. He's 26-12 his last 3 seasons at Louisville. 6-2 bowl record. I don't think he leaves because he is a Louisville alumni, but you can't lie. If one of these other big schools reaches out to him, that's an upgrade. These coaches don't just coach to coach. They coach because they want to be the best in the world. They want to prove they can win at the best programs. Some of these schools will give them a lot more opportunity. I do think he stays, but Jeff Brom is a name to look out for. Same with Brent Key at Georgia Tech. He is a Georgia Tech alumni. I think he likes it there. It's their first double-digit win in Georgia Tech since 2014 with him at coach. He's 23-14 the last 3 seasons. They've been getting ranked. They've been competitive. I think he loves it there. But if you're one of these other teams, you can see the coaching potential, and you might try to reach out to poach him anyways. Someone who I do think is a higher risk of getting poached because, one, he's a great coach. 2, maybe he doesn't have the connections at his college, is Eli Drinkwitz. He's 28-9 his last 3 seasons at Missouri. He's progressed them each year in the SEC. He has gotten them ranked extremely high. He has not thrived in the SEC schedule, but he has done very well in the SEC. I do think that there are jobs like a Florida that could reach out to him, or Penn State that could reach out to him. And it would be an upgrade over Missouri, and it would be enough for him to leave. Clark Leah is another guy who I don't think leaves. He hasn't had great career success, but obviously the last 2 seasons, he has had some of the better seasons Vanderbilt has ever seen. The last time Vanderbilt was ranked in the top 10 before this year was 1937, right? Obviously, he's only 18-18 his last 3 seasons. He has a career losing record, but this year they've really stood out. They've been able to expand in the transfer portal era. I think Clark Leah is a very good coach, and I do think schools will be reaching out to see what he's thinking. Lincoln Riley at USC, he's kind of said that he's very comfortable where he's at, and he wants to be there. And I do think now that USC is starting to pick it up at the end of the season, that is the case. I do think there was a point this season where him leaving was a little more of a possibility, specifically after the Notre Dame loss. We know he's one of the best offensive minds in the country. We know a team like Florida would probably love to have him, but I think he's staying put at USC. If I was Penn State, Matt Campbell would be who I push the hardest for right now. I don't think he's going to leave. He's kept Iowa State as a ranked team extremely consistently. He is 25-13 his last 3 seasons. Very good offensive mind. Is he always going to win 10 games? No. Is Iowa State always going to be a force of nature? No, but he's proven to be an elite coach at a school with less resources. So it doesn't sound like he is one of the main guys for Penn State, but if I was Penn State, I would definitely be trying to bring him over. Jed Fisher is another guy that could try to get pulled away. And keep in mind, you got to realize that while yes, there are only certain head coaching jobs available right now, as some of these other coaches get hired, new jobs become opening. That's why I have so many of these guys that doesn't seem like they would leave. But if Matt Campbell gets pulled away from Iowa State, now Iowa State's open. Or if Eli Drinkwitz gets pulled away, now Missouri's open. So I like to throw out a lot of names here because sometimes when you have a lot of openings, like we do this year, it forms a lot of new jobs. Jed Fish, the last 2 seasons at Washington, is 14-10. Obviously, most of those wins come from this year, but he showed the ability to turn around a team like Arizona. And then he came to a Washington team that lost a ton of talent to the draft and lost their head coach after going to the championship game. And he already has them back into a competitive standing in the Big Ten. So I think Jed Fish is a very good coach that one of these schools is going to look at. Scott Satterfield is probably my least favorite of the Power 4 coaches. He is having a great season this year, but his last 3 seasons at Cincinnati, he's 15-20. And to be honest, I thought he was going to get fired before the season or during the season. Obviously, he had a great season this year, and he's shown the ability to turn App State into multiple 10+ win seasons. It's not that I don't think he's a good coach. I just don't think he is on the level to get one of these better jobs. And I don't think Cincinnati is such a bad job where he would leave them to go to like UCLA or Cal. So I think he stays put, but the name gets floated out there a lot. So I wanted to include him in this list. Dan Mullen at UNLV is arguably my favorite Group of 5 coach. He has a 112-63 record. Before UNLV, this is only his first year there. His last 3 seasons at Florida, he was 24-12. And he has multiple 10+ win seasons. And the problem is, I don't think he's a big enough coach for LSU. I don't think Florida would bring him back. And now you're looking at Penn State maybe, but then Arkansas is already taken. Oklahoma State's already taken. Virginia Tech's already taken. So I kind of think he stays at UNLV because of those reasons. But I do think he was a hot name for like a Virginia Tech before they got Franklin. I think he's a very good coach. He's an extremely good recruiter as well. John Sumrall at Tulane has them ranked number 24. They are more than likely, unless they get upset, they're going to the American Conference Championship and have a very, very good shot at being in the college football playoffs. This is his second year at Tulane. He is 18-7 with a 41-11 career record. He turned both Troy and Tulane into ranked teams. So he can take small schools, get them ranked. I could see Florida being very interested in him. You would think LSU because Summerall already recruits well in Louisiana. He knows the state. I just think they look for a bigger hire than someone like Summerall. But I think it would be a wonderful hire for both those programs. Same thing about Ryan Silverfield at Memphis. 8-3, they had them ranked for a little bit this season. He's 50-23 as a career at Memphis. He's 30-8 the last 3 seasons. 4-0 in the bowl record. Like I said, Memphis has been a consistent top group of 6 team. You know, if you're one of these schools that not every school, not these big schools got to realize these group of 5 coaches can coach. We've seen someone like a Kurt Signetti come in and turn a team into a playoff contender immediately. You don't have to poach the coaches from the better schools. Sometimes the coaches out of the smaller schools that learn how to do more with less resources are the better options. So all these guys I'm mentioning, Summerall, Dan Mullen, Silverfield, and the next guys coming up are sometimes the better candidates for a Florida or for a LSU. Next, I had Alex Golesh up next. Obviously, he apparently has been hired at Arkansas. He was 22-15 at USF. Most of those wins come this season, but he's 2-0 in bowl play. He had USF ranked for a while. He also had a very tough schedule this year, so I give him a lot of credit for scheduling that and surviving. It almost played to their fault, but when you look at their out-of-conference play and their in-conference play, probably the hardest group of 5 schedule of any team. Eric Morris, already talked about, just giving him another shout out as one of those group of 5 coaches that teams should be looking out for. And then the last group of 5 coach is Bob Chesney. This kills me to say it as a JMU alumni, but I am mentally preparing to lose another JMU coach. He is 19-5, career record at JMU. He won his only bowl appearance. He took over a team that Kurt Signetti and just seniors basically gutted from that season. They were ranked. They lost almost all of their starters. Chesney came in and he has them ranked again, at least in the AP poll, in just 2 years. We have one of the best defenses in the country. Our offense has been improving. I think if you look at what he's done, the culture he builds quickly, he is one of the better coaching options for these small schools. If Penn State takes him, I will be heartbroken, but I will 100% understand because I think he's a great coach. Some current coordinators that I think should be hot hires as well, because we've seen some coordinators become the best coaches in the country. Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian, these guys, Dan Lanning. Sometimes you don't need a guy who's already a head coach. Go after a coordinator sometimes. Brian Hartline at Ohio State, Mike DeBrock at Notre Dame, Mike Shanahan, not related to the NFL Shanahans, at Indiana, and a few more right there as well. And on the defensive side of the ball, Glenn Schumann, Bryant Haynes, Corey Heatherman, Phil Parker, Blaine Baker, Sheil Wood. All these coordinators on both sides of the ball, I think, could be phenomenal head coaches if just given the chance. They've been at successful programs. They've ran their side of the field very well as well. And 2 guys that are currently in the NFL that I think would still make great coaches in college. Joe Brady, obviously he was on the LSU staff during the historic Joe Burrow season. He is the current Bills offensive coordinator. I think he would do great at the LSU job, but I think he is waiting for an NFL job because I do think he has a very good chance of getting one this season. And then Todd Monken, who is the former UGA offensive coordinator, who is now the Ravens offensive coordinator. I could see him, obviously he had won 2 national championships in college. I could see him coming back and being very successful. I could see him coming back and being a very successful head coach as well.